As we welcome in TSN Hockey Insider and one half of the Rain Dregs Hockey Podcast, Mr. Darren Dreger. Very spicy weekend for the Vancouver Canucks. How are you?
Oh, boy. I'm doing okay. I mean, yeah, tempers are running a little high. Emotions are up there as well. And, you know, that goes hand in hand when you've got inconsistency in your game and you've got the roster freeze, which is looming now imminently, you know, late on Wednesday night. So there are a lot of factors that are in play, but there's some teams that we're watching very, very closely in the insider business. And I wouldn't say Vancouver is right at the top of the list. I think that's that's a bit of an exaggeration. But given the comments that we heard from both Rick Tocchet and then the president of the club, Jimmy Rutherford, this weekend, yeah. It's a team worth
They're
paying
closer to the
attention
top than we'd expected, right?
Yeah, well,
in terms of panic.
the thing is, for a team of the winning, like, obviously there's Buffaloes of the world, Anaheims of the world, the Rangers of the world, but, you know, the Canucks...
Again, remember, the Rangers started to melt down and have all these sorts of vibes when they were 12-7-1, I think.
Yeah.
So, like...
Yeah. So Dregs Tocchet says he's not happy. He says some players are not emotionally invested. How concerned is he, and do you know with whom specifically he is concerned?
Well, I think we can see it, Matt, in some of the play or the inconsistency of the players who you rely on most. It's difficult to identify individual players, and the coach certainly isn't going to do that. Frankly, that's just the honesty of Rick Tocchet. I was a bit surprised that he took it to that point in answering the question the way that he did, to not only question the emotional commitment or investment of certain players, but he went on to say, look, to play in the National Hockey League, you've got to invest. You've got to commit. And I doubt very much that he's talking about fourth line guys or depth defense. So, yeah, I think you look at the players that he needs to lead. And whether that's, you know, Elias Pettersson, who for me, from an outsider perspective, appears to be more good than bad. Maybe there's been some inconsistency of late that's crept into his game. Brock Besser is one for sure that I think that we could put a check mark beside. Höglander, I mean, go down the list, right? And it is unfair to guess or to categorize. And what I would know is that, knowing Rick Tocchet the way I do, just to take it as far as he did and answering as honestly and as bluntly as he did, you can be darn sure that he's had that face-to-face conversation with the 4 or 5 guys or more that he is identifying. So I think we're just going to have to leave it to the coaching staff to show us in whatever fashion they can as to who specifically they're most concerned with.
Do you think he's already gone to management with his wish list in terms of what's needed for this club?
I think Rick Tocchet and the coaching staff, by and large, would have gone to management prior to the start of the year. You know, and sure, you have revisiting conversations because you're in the season, and as the old cliche goes in the Cap world, you better like your team in the off season, because trying to change it in season on the fly without doing just some basic tinkering is really difficult to do. It feels like we've been talking about the need for top 4, top 5 defensemen in Vancouver dating back to the offseason last year. Likewise for a piece up front, you know, winger, center, they'll take what they get, but that's got to be a player of some influence, a player of some impact. So I would think that that's what Tocchet is continually driving home to Patrick Allvin. And look, their relationship is top notch. It really is. I mean, as they should. Coach and general manager communicate all the time. And maybe sometimes your needs shift a little bit, and maybe more the sense of urgency shifts a little bit as well, as does, by the way, the players who could be in player. The players that are available, that maybe you didn't love the idea of this player a month ago, but now all of a sudden you're looking at change for the sake of making change. And I don't know that that's where Vancouver is, but I don't think there's any question that Rick Tocchet has made his feelings well known in a positive way as to what he thinks this group needs.
May not be where they are, but they are near that neighborhood. They are driving closer to that. And what you're saying is true about tweaking your team in the season. Except this is Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin, who have a bit of a reputation for this. We used to joke about Kevin Cheveldayoff not trading for a human being in 4 years, sort of thing. That's not this group. You know, these guys tweak. You mentioned the roster freeze.
Mm-hmm.
like it's there, it's a real thing, but is it a pressure point for anybody to like? It's not that long. It's not like it's a 4-week freeze. So like, does it really impact how managers are thinking? Do you think?
Not really, and unless you're a team that has cap issues, and you're getting healthier, and by the time you come out of the roster freeze, maybe there's an issue that needs to be addressed. Yeah. Sure. I guess, and I know we're going to get there. I think of the Buffalo Sabres. There's a team that hasn't won in 10 games. Kevin Adams is feeling the heat. And reportedly, his owner, Terry Bagula, fresh off an impressive Buffalo Bills win, is now shifted his focus from the National Football League to the NHL team, the other team he has as an owner. And is going to visit them on the road to probably find out what the heck is going on, or maybe something more significant. I can't be sure of that. That's a bit weird. It's a bit strange that he would go to those lengths. So I would look, if there's a team out there, the New York Rangers, they haven't done enough. They're still kind of way behind the 8 ball here, but they've done some stuff already, clearly. So if there's another team that I'd be keeping a close eye on, for sure, it's Buffalo. But I dealt directly with Kevin Adams yesterday. We had the regional Maple Leafs Buffalo Sabres game Sunday afternoon. And we know a week plus ago, Adams addressed his local media and said, look, I'm not making a dumb move. I'm not making a panic move. If there's something available right now that is going to help this team, sure. Yeah, I'm willing to do that. I checked in with him late last week, checked in with him again yesterday pregame, and he said, no, it's status quo for me. I'm in the same situation. But then, fellas, I watched that game, did that game. Beautiful start by the Sabres. They get out to a 2-0 lead. You've got fresh bodies in the lineup. Jack Quinn, weirdly, had been a healthy scratch for 5 consecutive games. Pop, he's got 2 goals. And you're looking at the Sabres going, finally. They're going to find a way to squeak one out in tough territory in Toronto. And then the second period collapses, and they can't pull it out of the fire. And here we are now talking about the desperation in Buffalo, and what more can this general manager do? So I'm sure Kevin Adams is a popular guy with the freeze looming, with every general manager, including Patrick Galvin, out there on line one saying, we can help you out, Kevin. Just give us the word.
So when he says, okay, so he's not going to make a dumb trade, a rash trade, what have you, but when he makes a trade, do you suspect it will be pieces that you could consider or could have considered part of the Sabres core? Yeah, like the Byram Cousins level players.
No, well, not unless somebody blows them out of the water. And just to revisit some morning speculation from a high-ranking source, I'm told that there's nothing going on between Vancouver and Buffalo. So we'll see if that, plays out. If something changes with a phone call, you always have to qualify when you're, again, trying to manage what could be a desperate situation. But no, I mean, if you watch the Sabres at all, you can appreciate why a lot of teams would be calling on Bo Byram. I remember having a conversation with you guys a number of weeks ago and wondering whether or not there might be an opportunity for Bo Byram, who contractually would be real attractive, not just based on his game, but look, the way things have gone in Buffalo, does he want to stay long-term? Probably not. So there'll be a lot of teams circling around there. Dylan Cousins in that game late last night, I can't remember which goal it was, whether it was the Tavares 4-3 goal. He was steamed. He was hot. You can just tell those players are wearing it. Their hearts are showing here. But I think, honestly, fellas, that's also part of the problem that Kevin Adams is dealing with. He's trying to evaluate how small the core of Buffalo is, including some of these young developing potential stars, or how big it is. And that's a predicament, right? Because are core players available? Well, let's see. If they lose 15 in a row, maybe everyone's on the block.
Marcus Pettersson is injured now, says Steve Sullivan, week to week. Does that mean he is off the block for that time, or does the price just go down because you're trading for an injured player? How do you perceive that'll go down?
You know what? It depends, I guess, on what week to week means. If week to week drifts into month to month, well, then we're having a different conversation perhaps 4 weeks from now. So we'll have to wait to identify what the exact severity of that injury is. And I'm always reminded, we just talked about Buffalo. If you could trade Jack Eichel the way the Sabres did to the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, granted, that was a conversation between Kelly McCrimmon and Kevin Adams that probably took months before they finally pulled the trigger on that one. And we know that it was a bit of an exploratory surgery, a bit of a gamble to repair the work that was needed done to the neck of Jack Eichel. But I'm always reminded, when you can trade a guy like that, who had $10 million per on his contract, even though Vegas saw what we see now and that he is a superstar, then you can trade an injured player. It's just that simple. It just depends on, again, the severity and how deep the team that's inquiring wants to dive into the medical records to prove that this isn't going to be a long-term or something that is going to take him out, beyond the next several weeks. So to be determined, but it doesn't help Kyle Dubas, I can assure you of that.
Rutherford says they're a couple of pieces away. Do you know what pieces he's referring to? Do you know if they have targeted players?
Oh, I'm sure they have, but the office that contains that whiteboard with those names on it is locked tight. We're not getting inside there. I can be specific to saying top 4 defense and now a winger. And for a good chunk of this year, they felt like it was probably going to be a centerman, like a 3C, but that want has shifted now to a winger. So, they'll continue to do their work. They'll continue to make the calls. And like we're reminded, and we've already touched on in this segment, those two guys work really, really hard in Patrick Allvin and Jimmy Rutherford. And when one of these teams, whether it's Buffalo, it's Nashville, it's another team that is struggling and just wants to kind of get ahead, as soon as one of those teams blinks. And then look, I don't know if you guys caught the Billy Guerin interview that we did on Ray and Dregs. Was it last week? Yeah, I believe it was. He talked about learning something very important during his days with Jimmy in Pittsburgh. And it wasn't to jump in early. I mean, that's already been established historically. It is to make sure that it's a fair deal for both teams. And it's interesting because when you approach it that way, then you get a lot more people coming to the dance because they don't feel like your main objective is to fleece them in a trade. No, you've got some pieces that you're okay with, but maybe they're underachieving, you don't love. Maybe you feel they need a change of scenery. And then you've got a David Jiricek who was in Columbus who couldn't make their lineup. Billy Guerin gives a boatload for to acquire, and now he's in Minnesota. So he learned that from Jimmy. So you could see change for the sake of change. So I'm sure there are a number of names on that whiteboard.
Look, it's been 2 games since Miller and Pettersson have been back in the lineup together. Some are drawing the line that, lo and behold, Elias goes pointless as soon as JT Miller comes back.
He's got 3 points.
Low ice totals, all that. Darren, if it ever came down to Miller or Pettersson and somebody has to go from this franchise.
Oh, boy.
Is your sense that this management group would cast its lot and coaching staff would cast its lot with JT?
Well, it would only be, this would only be my speculation because I don't want to make it sound like I've talked to either side about this.
Fair enough.
I would say that as long as Rick Tocchet is head coach of the Vancouver Canucks, and this isn't a slight on Elias Pettersson, it's just we know the type of players that Rick Tocchet gravitates to, and certainly JT Miller would fit more of the style of play that Rick Tocchet feels you can win with. And I'm not talking about winning regular season games. I'm talking about getting into that battle, a guy who will drag other players into that fight. That's JT Miller. When he's healthy, you guys have seen this game when it's at the top. And then, more recently, I'm not talking about the last few games prior to the leave of absence. For a number of reasons, it wasn't quite there. But it's not a knock on Pettersson at all. It really isn't. It's the style of player. I could ask the same thing of John Tortorella in Philadelphia. I could ask the same of Craig Berube in Toronto. The mold of that coach, if they could design a perfect player, it would be more of a hard-nosed energy, guy who, again, is willing to take you into the fight every single shift.
Lastly, Dregs, we did see a top four. Might just be hanging on as the top four, but we saw a trade of a top four defenseman on the weekend with Cam Fowler heading to St. Louis from Anaheim. He had a 4-team trade list, not excluding 4 teams, only 4 teams that he could be dealt to. Were the Canucks any possibility there?
No.
What's your understanding?
No.
Okay.
Now, I don't know that Patrick Galvin didn't make a call, but I do know that Pettersson, who represents Cam Fowler, told Pat Verbeek that if he had other teams inquiring, that he should let them know. And that's not to say that Cam would have expanded that list, but if you've got something out there that's of interest, that you want us to consider, then just let it be known. And if it's a fit, we'd consider that. And I think that was Cam Fowler wanting to do right by the Anaheim Ducks. And I was told that Vancouver was not among them. And in fact, I don't think that there was another team that was presented beyond the teams that Cam Fowler was willing to go to.
Hey, before you go, one last one, just on a temperature check. Because the Flames start has had people say, "Oh, don't swirl around, don't have the vultures around the Flames just yet," because they're playing okay, and they're still okay record wise.
Yeah,
but there's been some cracks. They've only got 3 wins in their last 10 games. Are they still standing pat here? Are they going to be still really patient here and see what the new year brings?
Yeah, really patient is the right way to describe it, Blake. But I do think that we then have to follow that up with to be determined, right? No different than if they had maintained their fast-paced start, and now all of a sudden you go into the new year and you're looking at February and you're a team that's challenging for the division. Okay, well, maybe there's an opportunity to bolster that lineup. Not give away young assets, but just give that group a little bit of help, almost as a reward. As you approach February, go into March, the trade deadline, and then you get ready for that final push. So the two things are kind of similar in that regard. I don't get any sense in dealing with the Calgary Flames that there's an impatience there. I think that they felt like they would come back down to earth. But I think that they're going to monitor the situation moving forward as well. They're a good team. Their goaltending, I think, was carrying them through a lot and covered up some holes that they had on the back end, and that allowed the forwards to chip in where they could. But again, I think it's a wait and see for Craig Conroy and the Calgary Flames. They still like their team. I don't see a fire sale sign going up anytime soon, if at all. But if the right opportunity presents, then maybe he does dabble at least a little bit.
Amazing stuff, Dregs. Thank you for the time here today, and we'll catch up down the road here.
Yeah, guys, have a good week.